This is my third time recording this video. First two times, it deleted off my phone for whatever reason. So I'm going to get this out. I'm going to give the shortened versions of it because I kept on trying to make it long. We have been lied to in religion. The Catholic Church has been lying to us for a very long time. Yeshua is not a Messiah. He is an ascended master. When the word had got out that the concept of a Messiah might have been born, what did Herod do? He decided to kill all the newborn sons. Mary and Joseph had ended up getting word of this, so what did they take him? They took him to Egypt. He grew up in Egypt from infancy to about 8, 9 years old, right? He comes back, and he's this wise little child. He's over here asking questions to these wise men in Palestine and Jerusalem, right? Because that's what they used to call it. It used to be Palestine. And they can't answer his questions, and they're asking him questions, and he's giving them very complex answers. Okay, boom. Eventually, he grows up a little bit more in Jerusalem, and then to solve this thirst that he had for knowledge, what does he do? He goes back to Kemet. What happens in Kemet? He ends up learning all these sacred ideas, sacred knowledge. What was Kemet about? What was Kemet known for at this time? Kemet was known for being the home of sacred geometry. Kemet was known for being the home of all mathematical equations and high technology, all ancient knowledge of which has been stated by all Greek philosophers throughout history, right? This is where Yeshua goes back to. He ends up coming back to Jerusalem after about almost a decade of living in Kemet, learning all of these things. There's even word that he went across the world. Argue with your mama. It could have happened. One thing's for certain, he was teaching African knowledge. He came back to Jerusalem and slowly started integrating all of the things of which he had learned from Kemet. What was that? Turning water into wine, manifesting matter out of nothing, walking on liquid matter, on liquid form as if it was solid, raising people from the dead, healing the sick simply by touching and speaking. It was the concept of belief. He was showing people the concept of manifestation, right? The thing about it is that not only was he doing these things, people had thought that he was the Messiah because of the things that he was doing. He was saying to these people, he was not the Messiah. He was saying to these people that anybody can do these things. Anybody can save themselves. Anybody can ask for forgiveness. You do not need to kill an animal. You do not need to do all these different type of rituals. You just must forgive those who trespass against you and ask those of which you have trespassed against for forgiveness. That was the whole goal, right? And he also was the one who introduced the concept of being judged after death. Why? Because Kemet believed that your heart was weighed by the feather of Ma'at, right? And ancient Judaism did not have the concept of judgment during these ancient times, right? It was just Old Testament. If you look in the Old Testament, there is no concept of a judgment in the afterlife. There's none. Well, the biggest problem is these people were seeing him doing all these miracles that these priests couldn't do, and they kept on calling him the Messiah. It didn't matter what all the times that he said he wasn't the Messiah. The Vatican knows this. The Vatican knows this. They have it in their archives. They've been saying this for years, but the thing about it is that they benefit off the concept of having Yeshua being looked at as the Messiah of the masses, right? Well, after all these miracles, eventually Yeshua realizes that man is too barbaric for him to change the world right then and there. He can't do it. It's just too barbaric. So what does he do? He's given the choice. Either he runs away or he lets these people kill him, modernize him, right, and stamp his message in forever for all those who actually wanted to seek true divine knowledge, right? He was the point, not the cross, but his concept, right? The concept of who he was as an individual. What's happening is that eventually they end up killing him, and he stood still. He stood 10 toes on it, right? Well, checkmate. The people who didn't want him being called the Messiah, they didn't realize by turning him into a martyr, it permanently stamped him into the religion. They didn't win, they just ended up getting rid of his vessel, but his soul lived on forever, right? What ends up happening after this is about a few hundred years after that, after he ends up dying, Rome ends up getting a hold of these two concepts, Judaism and the stories of Yeshua. They loved the concept of war that Judaism had ended up bringing to the table, the concept of conquering, the concept of slaying thy enemies, but they could not get rid of the message of Yeshua. So what did they do against Judaism's will, right? They end up stitching together Yeshua and Judaism. That's why the Old Testament and the New Testament is so starkly different. They end up stitching it together. They end up stitching it together with flesh and blood. They took the body of Yeshua and stitched it to the Talmud, and through many different types of filtering. When I mean filtering, I mean killing those who actually was preaching the real knowledge of Yeshua, what he was going around saying, and creating their own narratives, and filtering out, the real story of him, right? Turning him into the Messiah, of which he did not commit. He did not fulfill any of the prophecies. Right? And that's why Judaism does not claim for him to be the Messiah in the first place, because he didn't do anything the Messiah was supposed to do. What end up doing is they end up combining the two, and then use the love of Yeshua and the war of the Old Testament to then commit all of the crimes against the world. The Crusades, conversion therapy, just conversion, was no therapy, just blatant bloodshed and conversion. You understand me? This is what happened. I want to tell you more. I want to go into detail, but the video keeps on deleting. I'm not about to keep on doing this. So this is the story of Yeshua, right? This is just to plant the seed. This is to plant the seed. Yeshua was not a Messiah. He was an ascended master. He was a very good man. And they did crazy things to him, but he won because he became immortal the moment he stood 10 toes on his knowledge. He stood 10 toes on the concept of knowing that there was judgment after this, and that you can forgive yourself of your own sins. He stood 10 toes. And for that, he was granted immortality. And his heart was weighed. And he was deemed as innocent. I wish I could say more right now. If y'all want more, I can do that for y'all. But as far as right now, I have to keep it short, okay? I love y'all. Yeshua loves y'all. Your ancestors love y'all. Look, black people, we're not supposed to worship Yeshua. You're supposed to follow him, right? For those who worship him, do your research, read in between the lines of the Bible. For those who have a bad taste in their mouth, you have a bad taste in your mouth for good reason. He was not introduced to us the way he was supposed to be. But we don't have to reject him entirely, because he brought a lot of knowledge. But the knowledge that he was given was African. I love y'all. I'm going to catch you on the flip, okay?